going to be doing something a little bit different. I took a poll on the mom groups on my Facebook, and a lot of people wanted to hear my birth story. Now, I haven't talked about my birth story much because I have a lot of regret and guilt and wish I could do a lot of things differently when it comes to the way that I handled the birth of my son. So first, to understand kind of why and how, I need to give you a little bit of backstory. So before I got pregnant with Damien, I had a miscarriage in January of 2018. It was very, very hard on me, and very hard emotionally, very hard mentally, and also physically. And I was not trying to get pregnant again when I found out that I was pregnant with Damien in April of 2018. We weren't trying, and I was absolutely terrified when I found out I was pregnant again, because I knew that I could not go through the same thing again mentally. I just could not handle it. So I did everything in my power to make sure that I did everything right. I stopped drinking any kind of caffeine, which is a huge deal for me because I love my coffee. I didn't even drink soda. I watched everything I ate. I changed my diet completely. And in doing that, I ended up losing about 11 pounds in my first trimester, which I was already kind of overweight when I got pregnant. So losing that 11 pounds, it kind of made my doctor a little bit concerned. And I mean, it wasn't too much of a concern, but she was worried that I wasn't eating enough, which I felt like I was. I was eating every time I was hungry. I didn't have a lot of nausea, so it's not like it was weight loss from that, which was what her first thought was. But when I told her I wasn't nauseous at all, I wasn't throwing up, none of that was an issue, that's kind of when she was like, okay, well, you need to make sure that you're taking in enough calories, and started making me kind of calorie count and make sure I was getting enough. I was getting enough, and sometimes even more, but I didn't start gaining again really until like the end of my second trimester. And by that time, they were concerned on his ultrasounds, saying that he might have been not growing as fast. Not that he was small, not that he stopped growing, but just that he wasn't growing as fast. So I was having ultrasounds every single appointment just to make sure, measure his growth, make sure everything was going good the entire time, which I was fine with because I loved seeing him every time. I have so many ultrasound pictures, thank God. And it made me feel better every single time to be able to see him, hear his heartbeat. I could obviously feel him moving around at that point. He was constantly moving, but it just was reassuring to know that everything was going good at every appointment. So I was kind of happy with that. But as I progressed into my third trimester, they started talking about how it was probably a better idea to induce me because I was already overweight and because he was measuring a little bit small. They just wanted to make sure that it was kind of on their terms and they could make sure that everything was fine, because they didn't want me going over term because that could be dangerous for him in that instance, which was fine. And I was a little bit skeptical of the induction at first, but as I thought about it, sorry, that's my dog. As I thought about it, I thought about it long and hard, and it took me a few weeks, and I finally agreed to do the induction. So they scheduled my induction on December 20th, 2018. Well, needless to say, Damien decided that he was going to make his own entrance, and my water broke at 2 a.m., about 2 a.m. on December 19th. So it was kind of one of those things where I thought I just needed to use the bathroom, and I got up out of bed, and then all of a sudden, pop, and I was like, I think my water just broke. So I woke up Doug, I went to the bathroom, put on a pad. He woke his mom up, who was in for the birth from out of town, to help me out afterwards. And Doug was freaking out more than I was. And we pretty much hopped in the car right away. I already had everything ready because it was the day before my induction was supposed to be. So I had everything ready to go. So we just grabbed everything and went out the door. Looking back now, I probably would have waited because I hadn't even started having contractions yet. Nothing was really happening other than the fact that my water broke. But from what I heard, everybody said, go to the hospital when your water breaks. Well, turns out that I could have waited until the contractions had kind of started, but I didn't know that at the time. And we were only 5 minutes from the hospital, so I really could have waited a little while. The contraction had kind of started once I got to the hospital. They were every now and again. When we got there, I got put up to the maternity ward, and I was in there and everything was fine for a few hours. Like I said, I got there at 2 a.m. so they hooked me up to all the monitors, and we just kind of was trying to rest while everything was kind of calm still. So then a few hours later, the nurse came in and she kept telling me to move to different sides because not that Damien's heart rate was low, but it wasn't where they wanted it to be. They wanted it to be going up and down, and it was kind of staying more or less at the same consistency. So they wanted it to be going up and down with the contractions, because I guess that's what is normal. So after a few hours of that happening, and them coming in every few minutes to help me to move from side to side and stuff like that, and I was getting up and down, going to the bathroom, stuff like that, and getting a little uncomfortable because the water did not stop, which I wasn't prepared for, because they had told me most people, their water doesn't break. So it was kind of weird for me to have my water break like that. And on the 20th, which was when my induction date was due, I was going to be 39 weeks. So I was still a little bit early. Most people said that you don't even go into labor on your first pregnancy until after your due date. So like, I was not ready. I mean, I was ready, but I wasn't mentally ready for it all to happen. I didn't know what I was in for. But everything turned out to be a little hectic after that because they couldn't get his heart rate where they wanted it to be. So the doctors decided to put a tube into my cervix to pump water into Damien to make him a little more happy. And in doing that, I couldn't get up out of bed. I could not get up to go to the bathroom. I had to use bedpan, which I physically could not do. So after a few hours it was pretty easy for them to put it in. It didn't hurt too much or anything like that, but at that point I was not dilated at all. So at about 7 a.m. when my doctor got in, she had asked me if I wanted to start the Pitocin since I was going to be induced anyways. They were already planning on giving me Pitocin, and she was like, it won't hurt anything, it will hopefully start making you dilate faster, and kind of get things rolling, because it had been almost 8 hours and nothing was happening. I wasn't dilating at all. And I said, okay, that's fine. And looking back now, I probably wouldn't have. But I started the Pitocin, and the whole plan was that I was going to try and not have an epidural, because I was terrified of the epidural. So I wasn't going to have an epidural. I was going to use gas, and which was nitrous oxide, like laughing gas. My hospital actually provided that, so that's what I was going to use. Or I was going to use the pain reliever medicine, but I was going to try and go as long as possible without using anything. So after about 9 hours, with them giving me popsicles and water and everything else, I was getting very uncomfortable because I really needed to use the bathroom, but I physically could not use the bathroom because of this tube that they had in my cervix, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't use the bedpan. I was getting really uncomfortable. I could hardly turn to my side without it bothering me. So I was getting very uncomfortable, and the Pitocin was making my contractions really, really heavy. And they were getting very intense, to the point where I was grabbing onto the bed, and it was so uncomfortable because I was grabbing onto the bed. I was trying to just breathe through them. So I was grabbing onto the bed so I could try to breathe, and then every time I would have a contraction, the blood pressure cuff would tighten. Every single contraction, it was like at the same time it would happen. That's when the blood pressure machine wanted to go off, and it was driving me crazy because it started really hurting my arm, and because it was tightening, and then I was tightening my muscles, and it was terrible. So after a few more hours, they came and checked on me after they were upping and downing the Pitocin, because if they upped it too high, Damien was getting bothered by it, and then when they lowered it, they basically had to start all over again, and they were checking me, and I still wasn't dilating, and everything was just getting really overwhelming. I had to use the bathroom really, really bad, and Doug and his mom were there, and they were starting to get antsy because it had been like 12 hours and no progress. And so I signed the papers for the gas, but I hadn't gotten any yet. And then my doctor came up, and she asked me if I wanted to start the gas and air or anything, and I was handling the contractions pretty well. They were intense. They were very, very painful, but it wasn't so bad. I felt like I could keep breathing through them. So I told her, no, don't worry about it. And then she kind of told me that they were going to give me maybe 6 more hours at the most. And if I didn't start dilating at all, then they were going to give me a C-section. So that's when that kind of came up, and she just told me to keep trying to relax. I felt like if I could have gotten up and walked and stuff like that, it would help me dilate, but they told me the only thing that was keeping Damien happy was the water, and they couldn't take it out, because if they took it out, then they couldn't put it back in because of infection. So I was stuck with it, because that was the only thing keeping Damien happy. So I was getting really emotional at that point and really frustrated, and so when the doctor walked out, me and Doug kind of talked, and he was like, do you really want to go through this with no progress for another 6 hours just for them to tell you that you're gonna have a C-section anyways? And I really thought about it, and he was like, obviously it's your choice, but you really need to think about it and stuff. And Because I mean, if they're going to do it anyways, why go through all this pain and misery just to end up having the C-section anyways? So I went another like hour or so with very painful contractions, very just miserable. I couldn't use the bathroom. They came in to give me a small ultrasound to see and make sure that Damien was still head down, to see if he was pushing on my cervix, to see what was going on with him. And when they did that, she had told me that obviously my bladder was very full and they really couldn't see much. And so they tried to make me go to the bathroom, and I physically couldn't. Yeah, then they checked me again, told me that I hadn't progressed any. Still, I wasn't even a centimeter. So I finally broke down and was like, just give me the C-section. I can't do this for another 5 hours, and I just want this tube to come out. I want to be able to walk around. I want to be able to use the bathroom. I just want to be a little more comfortable. Looking back now, honestly, I probably would have just told them to give me the epidural and see if that helped, and tried to do it that way rather. But I was so terrified of the epidural. And I mean, really, going into the C-section, thinking about it now, going into the C-section, I had to have a spinal tap anyway, so it would have been probably just as bad as that, and that wasn't really anything. So I wish that I would have just gone that route first, because they kept asking me if I wanted an epidural, and I kept saying no, and asking me if I wanted gas and air, and I kept saying no. And I probably should have took something just to help me not tense up so bad during each contraction. But in the end, I had my C-section, and it was really scary, because when I went into the room, Doug obviously had to wait a little while before he could come in. They had to make sure that I was completely numb and pretty much about to start before they could have him come in. So once he was born, I remember everything. His first cry was so amazing. I got to hold him for a second, and then they took him to go get a bath. Doug went with him, which made me very sad because I couldn't go. I had to wait. They had to stitch me up and everything, and all I wanted was my baby back. I'm hoping I don't cry. All I wanted was my baby back. So as soon as I got into the room, I asked them to bring me the baby, and they did right away, because they were pretty much done about the same time that I was done, and they did right away, and I got to hold him. And then a nurse came in and gave me medicine through my IV, and almost immediately I started getting really tired, and I don't remember a whole lot after that, which makes me really sad, because I remember vaguely the nurse coming in and kind of showing me how to kind of start getting breastfeeding started, and we had skin to skin obviously, and I remember vaguely all of that, bits and pieces of it. And it was about almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon when he was born, and I really don't remember much until later on that night, around like midnight or so. So I don't remember very much about the first couple of hours of Damien's life, which gives me a lot of regret, and it hurts still, and I want so bad to have a different experience the next time I decide to have a baby. I want it to be so different. And I wish this would have went differently. But after that, everything was pretty fine. I mean, I breastfeeding went great almost the whole time we were in there until about the last day that I was in there, because my back was hurting so bad from laying in that bed and sitting in that bed. And I got up as much as I could to walk around, and I was moving around pretty quick right after the C-section. And so day 2, by that night, I was crying because my back hurt, and I was trying not to take pain medication because I was breastfeeding and I didn't want all that, and I wanted to be able to take care of Jamie, and I didn't want to be really tired all the time. I mean, I was already tired, but I didn't want to be sleeping and have them just come bring him to the nursery. Like, I wanted to be with him all the time. I wanted to be present. I didn't want to be on a lot of medications and stuff. So I didn't take a whole lot of medication, and I even asked them not to give me, because they were trying to give me, I don't even remember what they were trying to give me, but I had just asked them to just give me ibuprofen or Tylenol or something, because I didn't want to take heavy medications. I just didn't. And they called me crazy for it because I had just went through major surgery, which technically it is a major surgery, but I just didn't want medication, because I was breastfeeding, obviously, and I just wanted to, I felt better knowing that I didn't have anything really in my system that could go through to him at all. Even though they assured me that everything would be fine and that they wouldn't give me anything that would hurt the baby or anything, I just felt better as me to not do that. And so by day 2, I was ready to go home. I was like, get me out of here. My doctor cleared me, and we were just waiting for them to clear Damien to leave. And finally, at about 9 o'clock at night, they finally let me go home on the 21st. Yeah, it was the 21st at 9 o'clock at night. And it was freezing outside, and they didn't really want me to put a jacket on Damien because it's not safe in the car seat. So I had him wrapped up in blankets, and once we got home, everything was perfect. But it was really hard healing from the C-section. I didn't want to do much, and even to this day, obviously, I almost cried. I have a lot of regret about my birth, but I'm just glad that he's here and he's healthy, and that next time I will definitely have a VBAC, and I will definitely have someone there to guide me in the right direction, to make sure that I do what I want for my birth. Not that Doug did anything wrong, because he was only trying to help. He knew how miserable I was, so he was only trying to help. But someone to give me, make me think more clearly, and to tell me that there is another option, and that something else might have been a better option, and to kind of make me think about all my options and not just they're gonna do it anyways, or to talk me out of my fear of the epidural, because I think that was what was blocking my mind so much. I really think that if I would have gotten the epidural instead, it probably would have went a lot better. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have felt the actual birth, but I mean, I would have felt the pressure and stuff, but I would have been able to do my natural birth that I wanted instead of my C-section. And I really think that I should have just went that route, and next time I'm going to do things 100% differently. And that's my cue to go. So I will talk to you guys next time. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, and tell me what you want to see next. Bye.